All right, this is part three. I have 39 minutes left on my phone, so I can babble on for a good 10 minutes, and I'll start reading for the remaining 30 minutes. I'll read a good 6 pages of Lord of the Rings. I am on the Old Forest, chapter of the Old Forest. You guys like it when I babble on anyway, so when I babble on, it's more interesting, obviously. Right? So those two directors, if they're chosen, they're going to be the lucky ones who are going to get to direct. One of those two directors, if they're chosen, they're going to be the lucky ones who are going to get to direct my last Hope for Zanis movie. Which I told you, once you guys think I'm crazy now, but once you read my book, you will finally see what I mean. You're going to be like, oh my god, like this book is the best story ever told. This is the best fantasy story ever told. Best fantasy story. As you can't compare romance, science fiction, Western. You can't compare those horror novels like Stephen King. You can't compare a Stephen King novel with Lord of the Rings. As Stephen King is horror, is focuses on horror, whereas J.R.R. Tolkien is fantasy. Right? Because my book is in the fantasy genre, Last Hope for Xanth is in the fantasy genre. Last Hope for Xanth is the best fantasy novel ever written. And it'll be the best fantasy movie ever made if it's done right and you put a lot of money into it. It'll be one of the best, or if not the best movie ever made in history, man. That's how good my Last Hope for Xanth story is. If you put a lot of money into it, you're looking at the best story ever told in motion picture. Yes, even better than Peter Jackson's Lord of the Rings. That's how good Last Hope for Xanth is. I wouldn't be as cocky if my book wasn't as good, trust me. I'm reading Lord of the Rings right now. I've watched the movies many times. Amazing franchise, obviously. I'm reading Return of the King right now. I'm almost done. I only have a good 150 pages left, and I'm done Return of the King. If you don't include the appendices. In terms of the story, I have 150 pages left, and I'm done Return of the King. And I'm telling you right now, Return of the King, Two Towers, Fellowship of the Ring are amazing books, but those books are not as good as Xanus. As J.R.R. Tolkien did not keep me hooked the way Last of Us Xanus does. I'm gonna keep saying that. J.R.R. Tolkien did not keep me hooked the way Last of Us Xanus does. As Last of Us Xanus is that good of a story. I'm going over my book right now. I went over a good 5 pages today. I'm almost done volume 2, and I'm telling you right now, Last of Us Xanus is a better story. It's a better book than Lord of the Rings. As Lord of the Rings is kind of, in a way, for me personally, the Lord of the Rings series is kind of boring. The books are amazing. I prefer the movies over the books, obviously, but the books are amazing, amazing world building. But the book series, for me personally, is kind of boring. I'm gonna be honest. Lord of the Rings, the books. J.R.R. Tolkien's a legend. I respect him, but his writing can be a bit of a drag because he drags on with so many descriptions and details. It can become a drag and it can get very boring sometimes. Hence why I personally believe that Last of Us is a better story. It's a better book than Lord of the Rings. Trust me, all you fat Lord of the Rings fans think I'm crazy. All you Lord of the Rings nerds think I'm crazy. But once you read my book, you'll finally see what I mean. Oh my god, Ivan's Last of Us story is actually better than J.R.R. Tolkien's Lord of the Rings. Yeah, man. That's how good my book is. My book is the best fantasy novel ever written. As I told you, if I wasn't the son of God, I would still be rich. As Last of Us is a $1 billion story. If someone else wrote this book, they'd be a billionaire. Even if I traditionally published, I'd be a billionaire. Because this book would sell billions worldwide. It's a $1 billion story. It would beat out Harry Potter. If someone else wrote this book would beat out Harry Potter. It beat out Lord of the Rings. It beat out Lord of the Rings, beat out Harry Potter, beat out Game of Thrones, it beat out all those novels. Twilight, it would beat out all those novels. Because that's how good what? That's how good Last of Us is. Now, because I'm a son of God, the whole world's gonna buy it, obviously, because I'm special, obviously. But it's not just the fact that I'm the son of God. It's the fact that I wrote the best fantasy novel ever written. I wrote an amazing novel. I wrote an amazing artistic novel, man. And that's how you know I'm not just about the money. I'm all for the art too. As I didn't just write some shitty novel to make money. No, I put my blood, sweat, and tears. I poured my blood, sweat, and tears into my novel, and I wrote an amazing story. A story even better than Lord of the Rings. J.R.R. Tolkien's Lord of the Rings. A story better than J.R.R. Tolkien's Lord of the Rings. That's how top my Last of Us story is. That's how good my Last of Us story is. You're looking at the best story ever told in motion picture. And my wife, once she reads my book, she's gonna be shocked. Like, oh my god, Ivan, this is the best. This is Ivan. My wife is gonna be so shocked once I come out from death and I meet my wife in Los Angeles. The first things VJ's gonna tell me, Ivan, I read your book. That was such an amazing story. Oh my god, like your book is the best. This is the best book I ever read in my life. She's like, Ivan, did you really write this? Like Victoria S is gonna be so shocked. She's gonna be like, Ivan, did you really write this? I'm like, yeah, man, I fucking wrote this, man. She's like, Ivan, like you wrote this? Like you wrote this book? Ivan, you wrote this novel? I'm like, yeah, man, I wrote this novel, man. Are you sure you wrote the novel? Like, this is the best fantasy novel ever written. You know what I'm saying? This was such an amazing story. I'm like, no, man, Vijay, I wrote the book. She's gonna be like, oh my god, like this is the best novel ever written. Yeah, man. Vijay's gonna be shocked. And the whole world's gonna be shocked. All the fantasy nerds on Fantasy Red, they're all gonna be shocked. They're all gonna be drooling over my book. Fantasy Red's gonna explode with topics about my book, including obviously. Lord of the Rings Red's gonna explode with topics of my book. You have Fantasy Reddit where it's all fantasy novels, and you have Lord of the Rings Reddit where they just talk about everything related to Lord of the Rings, like the movies, the books, all that stuff. Lord of the Rings Reddit will explode talking about my book, man. It looks like crazy. And all those Lord of the Rings fans on Lord of the Rings Reddit and Fantasy Reddit, they're all gonna be like, yeah, man, even though I'm a Lord of the Rings fan and Lord of the Rings is the best fantasy novel ever written, even J.R.R. Tolkien's book doesn't top Ivan's Last of Us story. Ivan Rivera Last of Us story is better than J.R.R. Tolkien's Lord of the Rings. J.R.R. Tolkien has better world building than my book, obviously, but the story of Last of Us tops Lord of the Rings because Last of Us is that good. You're looking at the best fantasy novel ever written. Again, you might hear some noise upstairs because there's people dancing and they're listening to some Christian music, right? Because my step family, they're Christians, right? They're supposed Christians, obviously. Right? I'll babble on for a good 3 more minutes and I'll start reading. I only have like 30 minutes to read like 6 pages. I'm only going to read 6 pages and I'll end my video here. And I'll take a shower and I'll go to the store, get a pack of smokes, come back and enjoy the show. Obviously, right? Yeah. That's how top-notch Monster Roseanne's story will be, man. You're looking at the best story ever told in motion picture, man. That's how good Monster Rose is. I don't know. Do you guys prefer if I babble on for the remaining 30 minutes? Actually, no. I want to get through my Lord of the Rings series. I want to read it. I want to read it because I want to get through my Lord of the Rings series. I want to do my best to get through book 1. Because I'm not gonna procrastinate and keep postponing the dates, obviously. But yeah, man, that's how top notch my Last of Us will be. Looking at the best story ever told in motion picture. And I'll be selling my series on 4K Blu-ray on Amazon. It'll be sold in a box set. I'll sell it for a good $200, $180 to $200. So it's pricey, but if I want to make a nice 60% and Amazon makes a nice 40%, I have to price it for a lot of money, man. That way Amazon and SkySource benefit. Because I'm investing $970 million, I want to reap my return and make a nice profit for myself. $970 million is a shitload of money. That's why I'm pricing my series for a lot of money. I'll price my series for my 6 posters will be for a good like $80, $100, right? I'll release my posters right out a couple months after production's finished. So I'll let Amazon know, hey, we took our pitches for the posters. We want to release the posters on Amazon a couple months after production's finished. So while post-production is going on, the whole world will be buying the posters. Obviously, that way, when the red carpet happens, the fans can bring the posters and the actors can sign it. Obviously, and that's why I'm selling the posters for all my movies. I'm going to sell my posters separately from my movies, obviously. And then for my movie, I'm going to sell it for a good $200. The way me and my wife make a nice profit, and Amazon makes a nice profit. And I'm going to keep saying there's no actors getting a piece of the royalties for the movies and for the posters as well. The actors are not worth it, obviously. They're worth the millions, but that's it. They're not worth any more than that. You get paid for what you're worth in this world. And they get the $250,000 royalty check for the releases of all my movies. They get $250,000 royalty check for the releases of the movie that they're in. So the actors chosen for Zayans are not going to get the $250,000 royalty check for the organization movie, no, because they weren't in that movie. Only the actors in the organization will get the $250,000 royalty check because they were in the movie, obviously. But they get a $2,000 royalties check for all the Last of Us releases because they're in the movie, obviously, right? And that's how top much of a company me and my wife will have. Is everyone who works for my company will beg their asses off for me and my wife to resign them because Sky Source is that top notch, man. Every single member who works for my company will beg their asses off me wanting to resign them. But I told you I can't have everyone come back for all my movies. There's just a different amount of crewmen. The only people I'm gonna have come back, the only people who get to come back are the 7 teams. They're lucky, obviously. The head chefs, the graphic designers, web designer, and doc team. Those are the only people who are all going to be coming back, guaranteed. So if Eric Chong is hired, he's a lucky one. He's going to be coming back. He's going to be cooking for all my movies. And then the supervisors, a lot of the supervisors I'll have come back too. The supervisors, you can have them all come back. But not the same amount of supervisors will come back because for all my movies, I have a different amount of crewmen, obviously. The assistants, not everyone could come back because I'm for my organization movie, you're only looking at like 700, 600 crewmen for that. 600, 700 crewmen for organization movie. Last of Us Age, you're looking at 1,500 crewmen, so you're looking at like more than half of the people who are not coming back, obviously. So the people that I just mentioned, they're coming back, and a good chunk of the supervisors are coming back. But the assistants, a lot of them will not be coming back because I have a different amount of crewmen for all my movies, obviously. Very Unique, you're probably only looking at 350 crewmen for that movie. 350 crewmen, 400 crewmen for Very Unique. 350 crewmen, 380 crewmen for Very Unique. 400 crewmen for Very Unique. Hidden Vampire movie, you're probably looking at like 600, 500 crewmen. And it's not everyone will be coming back, hence why the 7 team, the head chefs, the doc team, photographers, graphic designers, web designer are all lucky because those guys are all, I'm going to be signing all of them. And they all get their $12,000 raise per movie, obviously. So Eric Chung is hired for the organization movie. He'll make his $412,000. The web designer will make his $362,000. The graphic designers will get their $362,000, obviously. Sorry, the graphic designer will get their $312,000. The web designer will get their $312,000. Obviously, the photographers will get their $362,000. Because the photographers I'm paying $350,000, and the web designer and graphic designer I'm paying $300,000, which is a nice paycheck for a couple of years as a graphic designer and web designer. Nice paycheck. Those guys are all my main people, and the head chefs get their $412,000 for the organization of the movie. Because I'm going to give them a $12,000 raise per movie, which is nice, obviously. And then by Very Unique, they'll be making $424,000. So Eric Chong is hired by Very Unique, will be making $424,000, which is nice, obviously. Hence why all those guys are all going to beg me wanting to resign them. The head chefs are going to beg. Eric Chong, if he's hired, he's going to beg, Ivan, I just want to work for you. You know what I'm saying? Your company's top notch. I had a blast. After experience luxury hotel party, you had a blast. Ivan, I just want to work for you. You know what I'm saying? They're all going to beg me to resign them, obviously, which I will. But even though I'm going to resign those guys, I'm going to have them sign contracts. That way it forces them to work hard. I'm going to have them contracted. That way it forces them to work hard. That way if they slack off, I can fire their ass. I can re-sign someone. I can hire someone else. Hence why after each movie project, the 7 team, the web designers, graphic designer, head chefs, they're all going to beg because technically speaking, their job isn't safe because they're contracted. As I can easily just resign someone. I can easily hire someone else. And so they're all going to beg, Ivan, please, man, like, can you resign me? I really want to work for you. They're all going to beg their fucking ass off. That's going to be fucking crazy, man. Yeah, man. Anyways, enough about Sky Source. And hence why Sky Source will be the best brand in entertainment business. And hence why all those actors and crewmen are all going to beg their fucking asses off for me when I to resign them. Because Sky Source is what? The best brand in the entertainment business. Yeah. Now, enough of me babbling on. I'm going to start reading here. So I'm on chapter 6. I'll read a good, 5 pages today. I'll read 5 pages. I'll read up to 148 and I'll stop. So I only have a good, I have a certain amount of time left. So I'll read a good 5 pages. And then I will what? I will end this video here. So I'm on chapter 6, The Old Forest of the Lord of the Rings, Fellowship of the Ring book. Okay. So Frodo woke suddenly. It was still dark in the room. Merry was standing there with a candle in one hand and banging on the door with the other. All right, what is it? Said Frodo, still shaken and bewildered. What is it? Cried Merry. It is time to get up. It is 4:30 and very foggy. Come on. Sam is already getting breakfast ready. Even Pippin is up, so they're now getting ready to leave to the Old Forest in the morning, obviously, right? Even Pippin is up. They're staying at Fredegar's house, right? I'm just going to saddle the ponies and fetch that one. And fetch the one that is to be baggage carrier. Wake that sluggard Fatty. At least he must get up and see us off. Soon after 6 o'clock, the 5 hobbits were ready to start. Fatty Bulger was still yawning. They stole quietly out of the house. Merry went in front leading a laden pony and took his way along a path that went through a spinney behind the house and then cut across several fields. The leaves of trees were glistening and every twig was dripping. The grass was gray with cold dew. Everything was still, and far away noises seemed near and clear. Fowls chatting in the yard. Someone closing a door of a distant house. In their shed they found the ponies, sturdy little beasts of the kind loved by hobbits. Not speedy, but good for a long day's work. They mounted, and soon they were riding off into the mist, which seemed to open reluctantly before them. An hour slowly and without talking, they saw the hedge loom suddenly ahead. It was tall and netted over with silver cobwebs. How are you going to get through this? Asked Fredegar. Follow me, said Merry, and you will see. He turned to the left along the hedge, and soon they came to a point where it bent inwards, running along the lip of a hollow. Right? A cutting had been made at some distance from the hedge, and went slopping gently into the ground. So they're trying to find a way to go through the forest, obviously. The thick forest, obviously, right? It had walls of brick at the sides, which rose steadily until suddenly they arched over and formed a tunnel that dived deep under the hedge and came out in a hollow on the other side. Here Fatty Bulger halted. Goodbye, Frodo, he said. I wish you were not going into the forest. I only hope you will not need rescue before the day is out. But good luck to you today and every day. Because remember how Fredegar said the Old Forest is dangerous, how you shouldn't pass through there? That's why he's telling Frodo and the hobbits, good luck on your journey out there, obviously, right? If there are no worse things ahead than the Old Forest, I shall be lucky, said Frodo. Tell Gandalf to hurry along the east road. We shall soon be back on it. And going as fast as we can. Goodbye, they cried, and rolled down the slope and disappeared from Fredegar's sight into the tunnel. It was dark and damp. At the far end it was closed by a gate of thick-set iron bars. Merry got down and unlocked the gate, and when they had all passed through, he pushed it to again. It shut with a clang, and the lock clicked. The sound was ominous. There, said Merry, you have left the Shire and are now outside on the edge of the full forest. So now Merry and all of them officially are outside the borders of the Shire. So the moment they cross the Old Forest, Frodo and all of them are officially outside the Shire. Whereas before, so Buckleberry, Crick Hollow and all that stuff, that's all within the borders of the Shire. Mr. Maggot's farm is within the borders of the Shire. But now when they're crossing the Old Forest, they're now outside the Shire, as mentioned here, obviously. Merry says you have left the Shire, obviously, and are now outside and on the edge of the Old Forest. Are the stories about it true? Asked Pippin. I don't know what stories you mean, Merry answered. If you mean the old bulgy stories fatty nurses used to tell him about goblins and wolves and things of that sort, I should say no. At any rate, I don't believe them, but the forest is queer. Everything in it very much more alive, more aware of what is going on, so to speak. The things are in the Shire. So Merry is saying, hey, look, Pippin asked Merry, hey, are the stories about the forest true? How there's wolves, you know what I'm saying? There's wolves, there's goblins that perhaps can roam in the forest, all that stuff, right? At any rate, I don't believe them, but the forest is queer. Everything in it is very much more alive, more aware of what is going on, so to speak, than things are in the Shire. And the trees do not like strangers. They watch you. They are usually content merely to watch you. So the trees, I guarantee you, J.R.R. Tolkien got the idea of the trees watching you from C.S. Lewis, The Chronicles of Narnia. You have the what? You have the spies of Gaddis the Witch, right, of Narnia. I guarantee J.R.R. Tolkien threw that in there for hey. I guarantee J.R.R. Tolkien threw that in there. Hey, I'm gonna have something similar like my buddy C.S. Lewis, right? Yeah, it's actually funny. They watch you. They're usually content merely to watch you as long as the daylight blasts. So the trees watch you, right? And don't do much. Just like for me, you have this, in my book, you have the spies of Aratet, who are the crows, obviously, who watch, obviously, right? Occasionally, the most unfriendly ones may drop a branch or stick a root out or grasp at you with a long trailer. But at night things can be most alarming, or so I am told. I have only once or twice been in here after dark, and then only near the hedge. I thought all the trees were whispering to each other, passing news and plots along an unintelligible language, and the branches swayed and groped without any wind. They do they do say the trees do actually move and can surround strangers and helm them in. In fact, Longo, just like the ants, right? So when they talk about, they do say the trees do actually move. When Mary and all of them are discussing about the legends of the forest and stuff, they were right. As in the Two Towers, Mary and Pippin meet the ants, obviously, who are trees, talking trees who move, obviously, right? The branches swayed and grouped without any wind. They do say the trees do actually move and can surround strangers and hem them in, like the ants, right? In fact, long ago they attacked the hedge. They came and planted themselves right by it and leaned over it. But the hobbits came and cut down hundreds of trees and made a great bonfire in the forest and burned all the ground in a long strip east of the hedge. After that, the trees gave up the attack, but they became very unfriendly. There is still a wide bare space not far inside where the bonfire was made. It is only the trees that are dangerous, asked Pippin. There are various queer things living deep in the forest and on the far side, said Mary. Or at least I have heard so, but I have never seen any of them. But something makes pass. Whenever one comes inside, one finds open tracks, but they seem to shift and change from time to time, in a queer fashion. Not far from this tunnel there is, or was for a long time, the beginning of a quite broad path leading to the bonfire glade, and then on more or less in our direction, east and a little north. That is the path I'm going to try and find. The hobbits now left the tunnel gate and rode across a wide hollow. So they went through the tunnel, obviously, to enter the forest, obviously. On the far side was a faint path leading up to the top, leading up onto the top floor of the forest. 100 yards and more beyond. 100 yards and more beyond. But it vanished as soon as it brought them under the trees. Looking back, they could see the dark line of the hedge through the stems of trees that were already thick about them. Looking ahead, they can see only tree trunks of innumerable sizes and shapes, straight or bent, twisted, leaning, squat or slender, smooth or gnarled and branched. And all the stems were green or gray with moss and slimy, shaggy growths. Mary alone seemed fairly cheerful. You had better lead on and find that path, Frodo said to him. Don't let us lose one another or forget which way the hedge lies. They picked a way among the trees, and their ponies plodded along, carefully avoiding the many writhing and interlacing roots. There were no undergrowth. I noticed something. In the book, Frodo and them actually have ponies and all that stuff, whereas in the movie they don't travel with ponies. 2 more pages and I'm done here. I only want to read 5 pages at a time. Then I'll babble on. For the remaining time I have left, I'll babble on and I'll talk about other stuff. So Frodo and them went through the tunnel, and now they're what? They're passing through the forest, obviously. But the forest is very, very what? It's easy to get lost in the forest, obviously. Hence why they're like let's not get lost in all that stuff, right? What was rising steadily. As they went forward, it seemed that the trees became taller, darker, and thicker. There was no sound, except an occasional drip of moisture falling through the still leaves. For the moment, there was no whispering or movement among the branches, but they all got uncomfortable, feeling that they were being watched with this disapproval. Because remember how Mary and them said how the trees are watching you and all that stuff, right? So Frodo and them are curious, are wondering if they're being watched in the forest, obviously. And this is where they meet Tom Bombadil. Interesting character, obviously, right? Right? They were being watched with disapproval, deepening to dislike, and even enmity. The feeling steadily grew until they found themselves looking up quickly, or glancing back over their shoulders, as if they expected a sudden blow. There was not as yet any sign of a path, and the trees seemed constantly to bar their way. Pippin suddenly felt that he could not bear it any longer, and without warning let out a shout. "Oi, oi!" he cried. "I'm not going to do anything. Just let me pass through, will you?" The others halted, startled, but the cry felt as if muffled by a heavy curtain. There was no echo or answer through the wood. It seemed to become more crowded and watchful than before. "I should not shout if I were you," said Mary. It does more harm than good." So Mary's telling them to be quiet, obviously, telling the hobbit to be quiet, obviously, telling Pippin to be quiet and all that stuff, right? Yeah. Frodo began to wonder if it were possible to find a way through. So they're trying to find a way through the forest, because the forest is very steep and thick, obviously, right? If it had been right to make the others come into this abominable wood, Mary was looking from side to side and seemed already uncertain which way to go. Pippin noticed it. "It has not taken you long to lose us," he said. But at that moment, Mary gave a whistle of relief and pointed ahead. "Well, well," he said, "these trees do shift. There is the bonfire glade in front of us, or I hope so. But the path to it seems to have moved away again." This is not in the movie, man. See what when I say the movie is only 20% of the book, I really mean it, as Peter Jackson left out a lot of details from the book, man. Hence why I believe if they ever do a remake, I believe Lord of the Rings should never be touched. I believe Lord of the Rings, I guarantee you in a good 40 years from now, they're going to end up doing a remake of Lord of the Rings. But I think Lord of the Rings cannot be touched. I think Lord of the Rings is such a sacred series that nobody should touch that series. It's very, very sacred, obviously. And I believe in the future, if they do make the movies, they should do 6 movies instead of 3. That way they can be more faithful to J.R.R. Tolkien's book, obviously. As if I did a remake of Lord of the Rings, which I would never do, obviously, I would never touch Lord of the Rings. It's too complicated for me. I would have it be in 6 movies, not 3 movies. That way you can follow a good chunk of the story, obviously, of the book. You have Tom Bombadil, Mr. Maggot. You know what I'm saying? You have Gildor. You have all these characters you can add in the movie, obviously. The light grew clearer as they went forward. Suddenly they came out of the trees and found themselves in a wide circular space. There was sky above them, blue and clear, to their surprise, for down under the forest roof they had not been able to see the rising morning and lifting of the mist. The sun was not, however, high enough yet to shine down into the clearing, though its light was on top of the trees. The leaves were all thicker and greener about the edge of the glade, enclosing it with almost solid wall. No tree grew there, only rough grass and many tall plants, stocky and faded hemlocks and wood parsley, fireweed seeding into fluffy ashes, and rampant nettles and thistles. A dreary place, but it seemed a charming and cheerful garden after the close forest. The hobbits felt encouraged, and looked up hopefully at the broadening daylight in the sky. At the far side of the glade there was a break in the wall of trees, and a clear path beyond it. They could see it running on into the wood, wide in places and open above. Though every now and again the trees drew in and overshadowed with their dark boughs. Up this path they rode. They were still climbing gently, but they now went much quicker. So J.R.R. Tolkien's describing their journey, their rough journey through the forest, obviously, right? Up this path they rode. They were still climbing gently, but they now went much quicker and with better heart, for it seemed to them that the forest had relented and was going to let them pass unhindered after all. But after a while, the air began to get hot and stuffy. The trees grew close again on the other side, and they could no longer see far ahead. Now stronger than ever, they felt again the will of the wood pressing on them. So silent was it that the fall of their ponies' hoofs, rustling on dead leaves and occasionally stumbling on hidden roots, seemed to thud in their ears. Frodo tried to sing a song to encourage them, but his voice sang to him, here goes another boring song again, right? "O wanderers in the shadowed land, despair not, for though dark they stand. All the woods there must be end at last, and see the open sun go past. The setting sun, the rising sun, the day's end, or the day's begun. For east or west all woods must fail." Failed, even as he said the word, his voice faded into silence. The air seemed heavy and the making of words wearisome. Just behind them a large branch fell from an old overhanging tree with a crash into the path. And I will end it there, obviously. So pretty much what I read today in the Old Forest. So four of them wake up at Fredegar's house, obviously, and they go through the tunnel through the forest, and then Merry tells the hobbits that there's legends about the forest, obviously, how the forest can watch you, there's wolves, there's goblins, you know what I'm saying? You get some history with the forest, obviously, and how some of the trees can move, and also my theory is you have the Ents, obviously. So Merry was right when he said some of the trees moved and talked and all that stuff, because you have the Ents in the two towers, obviously. We talked about the forest, how some trees in the forest moved and talked and all that stuff. It's the Ents, obviously. Merry was right, and J.R.R. Tolkien pretty much describes a rough journey through the forest, obviously. And that when they take that rough path through the forest, obviously, they end up meeting Tom Bombadil. They end up spotting his house. So Tom Bombadil's house is pretty much like in the middle of a forest, whatever it is. You pass this forest, and then once you pass the forest, you're at Tom Bombadil. You ride to Tom Bombadil's house, obviously. And Tom Bombadil's a very interesting character. He sings all these songs. He doesn't care about the ring. He's not affected by the ring. He's kind of like a human wizard kind of guy. I don't know if he's human. Is he human? I'll find out when I read the book. I think Tom Bombadil I think he's like human, or he might be a wizard or something like that. I don't know, man. I think he's human. From what I've remembered, I think he's human. I think he might be he could be something else too. I don't know. I believe he's human, I believe. I may be wrong, I don't know. To all you Lord of the Rings fans, you already know what he is. It's not really clear in the book what Tom Bombadil is. So to all you Lord of the Rings fans, you gotta help me out here. Is Tom Bombadil human? Is he human? I don't know. So pretty much you got what? Frodo and them wake up. They wake up in Fredegar's house. Fredegar warns them that the old forest is dangerous. They end up taking the path through the forest. They take the path through the tunnel, obviously. And then they talk about how there's theories, there's legends about the forest also, how there's wolves, goblins, the trees watch you, the trees move. You have the Ents, obviously, right? And then Frodo, J.R.R. Tolkien pretty much describes the rough journey, the rough path through the old forest. And that leads to them meeting Tom Bombadil, obviously. That pretty much sums up the old forest. There's not that much to talk about for that, obviously. And tomorrow I'll be continuing. Tomorrow I'll finish off chapter 6. I'll read a good 8 pages and I'll finish off chapter 6. And then the interesting one, chapter 7, is Tom Bombadil, when they meet Tom Bombadil. You're looking at a very, very interesting chapter. Tom Bombadil sings all these songs. Bombadillo, Tom Bombadillo, Bombadillo. You know what I'm saying? I'll shut my camera off here.